This session, the topic for today with the capacity building event is Inside Out. And we've got Nadeen who'll be holding space for us, Dr. Nadeen Moolla. And Nadeen will be discussing the importance of why development and support must happen inside organizations in order to ensure efficacy outside. So it's about building professional and personal capacity of staff, of team members. That's really, really fundamental to an organization's impact in the field. So we really do need to invest on the inside in order to make a difference on the outside. So a little bit about the person who will be holding space for us. Dr. Nadeen Moolla is an educational psychologist who leads and manages research and development at the Pearson Marang Education Trust, which is a nonprofit social impact organization that's involved in teacher and school development in township and rural schools. She is also responsible for facilitating professional and personal development of staff within the organization and oversees the development of programs, of resources, as well as interventions aimed at supporting teachers, educational leaders in school. And Nadeen, I know this for sure, is really, really, really passionate about contributing to change in the South Africa education ecosystem. So this is the perfect person to be holding space for us and talking us through this topic. So over to you, Nadeen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lungi, for the introduction. There are many people on the chat who know me, know of the work that we do. So it was kind of you. Thank you. But I want to just launch straight into the session. Something that I've been really wanting to share, to talk about with colleagues and peers in the sector for quite some time, because it's something that I personally and our organization professionally have invested in a lot of energy, and heart. So I'm hoping that this will ring true for many. Please hear my input not as a done deal, not as a process of perfection by any means. So I welcome critical feedback, thoughts and ideas from all of you in the room, in the space, to say, have you thought about this? What about this? Think about how to do things differently. So this is, on the one hand, a sharing from what it is that we do in our organization, but it's also an invitation to all of you to share your own ideas, and I'll come to that a little later. I've designed literally I have 4 or 5 slides, so it's not a presentation as such, and I really just wanted to talk off the cuff. So don't see this as a presentation of perfection by any means. It's really me wanting to share with peers and colleagues who I respect a great deal. So let me, if I can get my slides to move. There we go. So let me talk a little bit about the organization that I work for and with. I'm based within the Pearson Marang Education Trust, PDMET for short. And we are involved in working with schools. So we do teacher and school development work across the country in 6 districts. And essentially our focus is on supporting and developing solutions for schools to improve teaching and learning specifically. But our emphasis is very much on working with schools that are challenged or find themselves in challenging contexts. We don't come in with something new and different. We essentially hold on to what the DBE is expecting of schools, and our main role really is to help to mediate policy. As we all know, huge challenges in the sector always. South Africa is really good at designing good policy, but not as good at implementing policy. So that's really the task that we try to hold quite strongly. So in the telling of my story, I think something that I want all of us to hold is the fact that a lot of the work that we do within PDMET is grounded within an understanding and even an embracing of change. Change is seen as the only constant. And we found through our many years of working together, working with schools, working within our organization, with districts, that people change, people come and go. Our organization has changed. Our funder has changed and will soon change. Our schools have changed. The districts we work with have changed. The education sector changed, and of course, without a doubt, COVID-19, as we all know, changed everything. And so the argument, therefore, and that's the reason I start with this as a kind of a moment of beginning, the kind of once upon a time, is it's essentially, the story goes, once upon a time, change happened. And if change happens, the people and the sector and the organizations need to find a way to change within that. And that's really the premise that I'm coming from, is if change is happening around you, you can't continue to just do the same thing you were doing before. So what we found within PDMET was that our change story looked quite interesting. Although I'm mapping a picture from 2015, the trust, Pearson Marang Education Trust, with a different name, has existed since 2008. A much smaller organization for the first few years, and in 2015 there was a decision to expand to respond to the change which was understood to be happening within education. And essentially what we found was, and that's the title of the slide, is, so what did we have and what did we need? And what you see in the kind of chronology on the slide is that in 2015, what PDMET needed was, we needed specialists, we needed a curriculum specialist and a leadership and management specialist who was going to be based within a district to support 20 schools. So we have a team of people who go into schools and work with SMTs and with teachers on the ground, in the field, spending a day at a time over 6 to 8 weeks within the school. So we needed specialists, but we were adamant that we also needed people who were local. We were not going to have a full team of people employed and based, for example, in Cape Town, which is where I'm based, and having to travel in and out of the Northwest, Mpumalanga, the Eastern Cape, where our schools are based. What we were looking for was people who were local to the area, may even have taught in some of the schools that we were going to find ourselves in, were local in terms of language, culture, the community, people who had a deep understanding of how things worked, what made communities and schools tick in those areas, rather than parachuting people like myself and whoever else in from outside, who would pop in and out of schools and not really be a part of the family, so to speak, because we weren't living and breathing the same air. We also needed people who were passionate, people who were committed to education and to development in particular. And so what did we have? We had 16 individuals who we employed in 2015. Some were just teachers, as people sometimes say. They were post-level 1 teachers. We had a handful who had held HOD positions in schools, 1 or 2 who were deputies or principals in schools, and we even were fortunate enough to have 1 or 2 people who'd held positions within the district as district officials. So this was this kind of skill set that we were sitting with in 2015, and realized that we needed to work on capacity and empowerment and skills development, because what people did well in their schools as teachers, as deputy principals and principals, was something of a grounding to work with. But we were expecting people to do something quite different. We were expecting them to facilitate school development. We were expecting them to run workshops. We were expecting them to mentor teachers and SMT members. So we realized quite quickly that, that we needed to expand the skill set, that our team had. And that's where our work originally began. We worked very hard on content development. I trained the team around workshop facilitation. We worked on developing and enhancing mathematics content because that's a strong focus of our work. We have a strong focus. Our mandate is around ensuring that every classroom is a reading classroom. So we invested a lot of energy and time in training our staff around the reading-centered method, which is what we use to help teachers to make sure that every lesson is a lesson where reading takes place. So that's where we began. In 2016, I was reminded that my role was research and development manager, and so I needed to make sure that we had a strong research component of our work. PDMET does. I think we pride ourselves on the fact that we work rigorously. We have a strong evidence-based approach in our work. So through a participatory action research design, we make sure that monitoring and evaluation is at the heart of what it is that we do. And so here I had a team of 16 at the time who was saying, well, we can go into schools and we can support teachers, but now you want us to collect data and you want us to capture data and you want us to do what this thing called M&E. And so we realized quite quickly that we needed to capacitate all of our colleagues to understand the game of research. And I say game not in a frivolous way, but to understand that there are particular rules that apply, that there's a way that one does it, there's a way to win it if you work as a team. So a lot of energy was invested in helping our staff to understand what action research actually is, and then to move into an M&E focus, which is where we headed into in 2018 and 2019. And then COVID happened, and we were blocked through lockdown and all sorts of union/TBE regulations. We were unable to enter into schools for much of 2020 and realized that we now had to move into a remote way of working. So two things shifted drastically during COVID. The one was how we worked. So we had to work at a distance, which meant, you know, doctors have referred to, so doctors and health practitioners do teleconsults. PDMET had to do the same. So we found ourselves having to work remotely by contacting our schools, by working with teachers, guiding them, supporting them, using a cell phone. That was all we had. Because of the places and spaces our schools are in, data and internet connectivity is a huge challenge. So what we have now was not a luxury we had. We couldn't run virtual workshops because teachers just couldn't get online. So we literally were contacting teachers mostly by telephone and having cell phone conversations. But when you do that, it takes a different kind of skill. And so we had to upskill staff around how to conduct conversations in a mentorship way. And so from having been a teacher to an HOD to being a facilitator of school development practice, we now found ourselves needing to train our staff as mentors, which is what we then did. And then obviously COVID opened up a huge challenge around emotional well-being and the need for psychosocial support. None of our staff, save one who are out in the field, have a strong background in psychology. Pretty much the most they would have had is possibly a module or two when they did their BEd or PGCE or their college qualification many years ago. And so I found myself having to help colleagues to understand what psychology is about, what psychological support is about, how it is that you have a conversation with someone that is supportive and compassionate and kind and empathic, something which comes perhaps easily to some, but not as easily to others. So we invested a lot of time and energy in moving people from where they were to where they are now, based on what it is that, when I say what we needed, it was really about what the sector needed. and specifically what our schools and our teachers needed. So what do we do within PDMET? And I want to just share the way in which we function in terms of setting up structures and procedures that assist with this inside-out development approach that I'm kind of pushing for, expecting. In fact, it seems to be almost insane that organizations, NGOs or otherwise, could even exist well if they weren't investing on the inside in order to be able to maximize effect on the outside. So what you see in the green circles is essentially what we do. So it's the kind of logistics of it. The biggest circle, I feel, probably captures most powerfully the most powerful intervention we have, which is a weekly check-in. It's very much more than a check-in. We have our Fridays are dedicated to a weekly report. So there's a written report, a written reflective report that every facilitator as a team, each team, a team of 2 submits a weekly report, which we all get access to. We've trained people on how to use Google Docs, so everything gets loaded. Everyone gets to see everything all at the same time. And I often say to colleagues, this is like our staff meeting, because we have colleagues spread around the country in 6 districts across 6 provinces. Our head office team is based in Cape Town. So we don't have the luxury of being able to connect in a staff meeting regularly. So our weekly reports function as such. And then we also do, a weekly call, which is literally like a mini staff meeting between supervisors and their facilitators. So within the structure of the organization, somebody will phone you every Friday to 1, check in on how you're doing personally, and 2, to help you to reflect on the week that you've just experienced. What worked during the week? What were your challenges? Often this is a time where people will raise issues that emerged in a school, a difficult principal, perhaps a district official who's not kind of cooperating. So highlights and kind of lowlights of the week are shared, and colleagues mentor one another in order to help them to think through how to do things differently in the week to come, or the next visit to that particular school, and so on. So Fridays are a powerful and an extremely important opportunity for us to share our practice, to reflect on one another's experiences, and to just check in and make sure that everyone's okay. So every call starts off with, how are you? How are you doing? How's the family? How's your health? Because we've got lots of people around about my age who are now dealing with blood pressure and diabetes and sore legs and all of that kind of thing. So we factor in all of that because those things matter in the work that people do. When you have to go to school and you have aching legs and you can't stand for a workshop that's been designed to be run for 2 hours, then that's something that we as colleagues need to know to help, to alleviate, to work around, and so on. Secondly is we on the right hand side in the green, we have a quarterly full day together, all online because we're also far away, which we generally call a staff meeting, but it's a full day where we touch base, we reflect on the term that's gone by, we do some planning for the term that runs ahead, and we ensure that there's always a space for staff development, either professional development space and sometimes both, a personal development space. We've been fortunate enough to have an annual block week together, face-to-face, save for the years when COVID prevented travel across the provinces. Within our budget, we've been fortunate enough to be able to ensure that all staff are able to get on a plane, be accommodated in a decent living arrangement, where we spend a week together. We spend a week together to strategize around the year that lies ahead, to reflect on the year that's gone behind us, and to develop capacity. So it's literally, because I have my background's in academia, So we run it like a block week. We run it as if we were teaching a diploma course, or for that matter, a degree course. So the design is soft and gentle and flexible, but the element of professionalism and focus is undoubted, is there. The three orange circles or ovals are just flagging the kind of content that has emerged over the years within these three green spaces. I really want to flag the one on the left, emotional intelligence and emotional well-being first, even though that emerged as our highlight or emphasis in the last 2 years. PDMET has always been an organization that begins with the person and then moves into the professional. But certainly COVID has forced us to embrace this as a content area much more. Schools have been so much more amenable to this. There's always been a huge stigma around things emotional, around mental illness, mental health, and mental disease. And there is, even in the heart of nowhere, where so many of our schools lie, people have embraced this as a place that one needs to go to. So we do a lot of work on emotional intelligence, helping people to understand themselves and how it is that they engage with others, and how it is that they take care of themselves and take care of others. I mentioned already the strong emphasis on research skills and development, and around how M&E has become a strong thrust of our work. I can recall in 2017 where I spoke about this with so much ease, and one of our colleagues just said to me, Nadeen, we have no idea what you're talking about. So I developed all these grids for how to collect data and how to complete them, and thinking, oh, this is easy as pie, everybody can do this. But it's taken us some years to perfect the art. We do a lot of peer support, peer training. Even now, my colleagues will say to you, we still moderate M&E grids once a month, so that we're making sure that there's a quality assurance exercise taking place. So it's embedded in constant feedback, constant reflection, making sure that everyone's on track, always on the same page. In terms of curriculum, I think I've mentioned this before, a strong emphasis on mathematics and reading, reading skills development in order to teach reading skills to teachers, who then are able to teach it with reasonable ease to learners. We have a strong emphasis on inclusive education, a strong emphasis on curriculum differentiation and dealing with learners who experience barriers to learning, because none of our schools have easy access, as they do, those of you who work in the Western Cape will know, as they do to psychologists and social workers and learning support teachers and advisors. Those are absent entities in other provinces. So that's the kind of work that our facilitators do with teachers. They lap this up with glee. Education White Paper 6 is not something they run away from, something they embrace. It's work they want to do, which makes what we do so amazing. But in order for our staff to do it out there, I needed to make sure that our team was sussed, that our team knew what inclusive education is, that our team overcame their own biases around disability and barriers to learning and emotional and other academic disorders and so on. So a lot of hard work had to be done on the inside in order to ensure that we are able to present to teachers these kinds of issues with a sense of openness and understanding and compassion. We've even gone through all the way back to probably first, second year education, having to reteach Bloom's taxonomy. Why? Because we want to make sure that when assessments are designed, they're designed at different levels, that we're making sure that all cognitive levels are addressed, both in teaching and learning situations, in assessment activities. We're wanting to make sure that everyone is accommodated in the classroom and no learner is left behind. But in order for us to do that with teachers, our own staff needed to revisit their own knowledge base around Bloom's, their own knowledge base around the work of theorists like Lev Vygotsky. We do a lot of work looking at habits of mind. So this is what we've kind of invested in the staff, inside, in our team, in our colleagues, in our friends, in our peers, so that when they step out of their cars in the parking lots in schools, they feel completely capacitated to act with confidence and competence and compassion. So that's the way in which we work. Something that I think is quite important for me to flag is the interplay between personal development and professional development. So PDMET's argument, and this is part of the inside out, in order for you to be sussed professionally, our argument is that it has to begin with the heart and soul on the inside. So we're talking about inside out, from the personal and then into the professional space. We talk inside out as in we build within PDMET, our PDMET staff, in order that they can make an impact on the outside with school staff. We build PDMET as an organization, as an inside, in order to be able to impact or have an effect on schools, on districts, and the broader education ecosystem. So the inside out begins quite small at the level of heart and soul in order to reach all the way to the larger education ecosystem, DBE and the rest. So that's my sharing, my reflection. And I said to Lungi, I don't want this just to pause there. I obviously haven't been keeping an eye on the chat, but I would like to put these 2 points forward for conversation. I would really value if people were to come into the space and use your voice. If you're able to put videos on, please do so. I really would like to hear any reflections around what it is that I've shared. And perhaps in particular, for anyone who wants to say a little bit about what you do in your own organizations that may be similar or different, because I want very much for all of us to see my sharing as really just a catalyst for us to share more broadly with peer with our sister organizations who are out there and on this call. So I'm going to pause there and open up for questions and ask Lungi to assist with getting voices into the room as can happen. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much, Nadeen. There has been engagement and some interaction going on the chat. You've left us with some gems. I mean, inside out from the personal and into the professional space. You mentioned that it's at the level of heart and soul. We did have a question that came up earlier from Ursula, and Ursula was saying, how do you monitor and motivate your team to keep those reports up to date? She's finding that consistency is skills that we need to develop, but she's not sure how to start. So that was Ursula's question. And I see that Robin also was engaging with Ursula on that question, saying that I feel that shifting the focus from developing the report for its own sake to developing the report for the sake of co-reflection and deepening shared understanding helps. So that was one of the questions on the chat, but I love that you've already sort of invited more thinking on this topic and saying, what are you doing that is similar or different in your own space, in your own organizations, and really just opening it up to everybody to make this as engaging as possible. So please, you can make sure to unmute yourself, raise a hand, and of course to make use of the chat as well. Just check.
Lungi, perhaps while we're waiting for others, let me respond in the meanwhile to Ursula's question. Hi, Ursula. I think Robin's right, but that in itself takes time, and it takes relationship building too. One of the ways, so if I were to talk from a quality assurance perspective, and I'm not sure how many people were in the session that was held, the NASCEE session that was held a couple of weeks ago, where we were deliberating this whole thing about what it means to be a leader and a manager. So let me give you a manager's response first. The manager's response is that when reports are submitted, they all go through what we call a moderation process. So there is a structure within the organization where people are expected to submit their work to somebody else for check, for quality assurance, because all of our reports go back to schools and they all go to districts. So and for those of you who know me, I'm a bit pedantic. So, you're wanting to make sure that things look good, that they're professional and smart. You're not sitting with silly spelling errors, all of that kind of thing. So that moderation exercise happens on a quarterly basis when the reports are written. There are also reports that are sent through to schools and to districts. So all of our colleagues, I think, have quite a deep understanding of accountability to our partner schools and our partner districts. So, when you ask a question like, how do you make sure people submit it? Quite honestly, there's just no choice, because if you don't complete your 20 reports for your 20 schools, then that means a school's not going to have one. And then my question is, so what are you going to do? So I think there's quite a deep sense, and that brings me to the leadership aspect of the work that I do, which is that I think we're extremely fortunate in PDMET that we have a group of people who are so deeply committed to the development of the schools that they work with. So they don't want to let anybody down. And if part of the development process is feedback, then there is no way that anyone is going to say, I don't want to do this. I'm not going to do this. In terms of our weekly reporting, which is in-house, it's a reflective space. There is no, somebody could very well just not do it. I think that, again, we're relying on the fact that we work with 16 individuals who, maybe I must just say, we're very, very fortunate that we don't have people who duck and dive. The quality varies. So there's my manager voice. So, we have reports coming from 6 different districts, and the quality of one district report is different from another. But the way in which I engage with that report is I then read, it's like a 22-page document once a week. But I engage with it and put comments in the comment boxes. So I might say something like, gosh, Limpopo, this is a really amazing intervention. I'm hoping others will have a look and try this in their own schools. So there's an opportunity, and that's why Google Docs is so helpful, because it becomes an opportunity for people to share. For those who struggle with the internet and connectivity and all of that, WhatsApp's amazing. WhatsApp's my savior. So literally what I do is, if I work on hard copy, because I'm a scribbler, I circle things, I scribble something, I put ticks next to things and smiley faces, I take a picture of it. We have a staff WhatsApp group. I take a pic of it, I send the pic, everybody gets to see it quick, fast. They don't have to open an email, they don't have to go online. So there are ways around it that ensures collective collective understanding, collective ownership, because what's happening in Mpumalanga will get adopted by the Eastern Cape team, and they've just said this to me recently. It will do it in the schools where we know it will work. So there's no obligation to copy and paste. People are expected to work with what works. But there is a deep passion for the work that they're involved in. So the idea of ducking and diving is fortunately not something I have to kind of deal with too much. But creating, yeah, I mean, I didn't even realize this, but as I was talking to you, creating a collective conversation, yeah, has a lot of power. And WhatsApp is, I mean, it's such a simple tool, but gee whiz, it works. It really does. I hope that helps a bit, Ursula.
Great. Thanks so much for that, Ursula, for the question, and Nadeen for really getting into it. That was really helpful for all of us to hear. I just want to take us back to the question, but maybe put it in a different way. You mentioned in the presentation, you know, the importance of investing in the team, in the staff, in the school. So that investment is key. And there's so many ways that we can all make that investment in terms of how we show up in this space, in terms of even just the infrastructure, the system itself. There's many ways. And I'm curious to find out from the people in the room, so to speak, what investments have you made? I mean, it can be as simple as one of the things that I like to do in the work is the wisdom and stepping into the wisdom of the pause, and just allowing the team, staff members, to pause. And I know that sounds counterintuitive when we're all so busy and there's so much to do, but in this virtual space, and we sometimes want to close the pause with some kind of noise. And so taking a bit of a breather, something as simple as before a meeting or after a meeting, just using the breath as an anchor is so powerful, and we know the science supports this now. So just taking, as Robin says in the chat, just taking the time can also be seen as an investment. And yeah, I'd love to hear if there are other approaches that we could share, that we can learn from each other, that people are already implementing or exploring, and what's working, what's not working. I'm just trying to see if there's any hands. I don't see a hand, but there's still comments. So maybe the comments might inspire us to get into another theme of the presentation. And one of the comments that I'm looking at here as I continue to scroll, the importance of advocacy. And so I'm sure all of us have some kind of role that we can play to advocate for the value of care, for the value of relationship and rigor in our work. And, you know, whichever role you sit in, whichever space you're in, we all can have that space. And maybe I can use this opportunity to invite Robin to speak a little bit about that, because she made the comment. If you don't mind, Robin, sorry to put you on the spot.
I think she's dropped off, Lungi.
Oh, have we lost her? Okay.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to say a little bit about the notion of investment. And sometimes that investment, you know, often the word investment links with finance, and I'm sure there is a kind of spillover into that. But something that Nikki, our trust director, I can't say works with freely, but works with very flexibly is time. And so she can't say to people, sometimes I'm going to give you more money, or I'm going to make sure that you earn more, or you know what, if you do something extra, you'll get an extra. But what Nikki is very cognizant of is the value of time to allow people to breathe. And I mean that metaphorically. So and we have a number of our staff members who went through a hellish time during COVID. Every single one of us lost someone during COVID. We literally had to develop the stats around it. So, and almost every single one of us were affected by, like infected. I mean, so we all had COVID and we all lost someone as a consequence of COVID. And we struggle with losses. Yesterday, I sent a message to the staff informing some, of one of our colleagues whose brother had passed away. And Nikki's approach as our director is that she understands completely that people cannot function optimally if they're in a hurt space. So sometimes it's when there's pain that she will just say, she will say to me, allow them whatever time they need, without logging leave, without, if they need 2 hours away, tell them to switch off their laptop, tell them to switch off their cell phones, and just go and sit outside, take a walk, do whatever it is that they want. And that kind of kindness within an organization. So it's not about the person, because I realize that it's become the culture of PDMET, that our culture is a kind culture. We understand immediately when there are shaky experiences that people cannot be expected to still jump in their car and drive for 2 hours in order to get to a school and spend a day at the school running workshops. So that kind of investment in time and allowing people time to settle, time to breathe, when the next day is the day of schools reopening and you know that actually people with little ones need to have a day or half a day to prep their child for school the next day, Nikki will say, take a couple of hours, go and be with your babies, do what you need to do. You'll make this time up at another time. So, I spoke a lot about capacity as in knowledge and content and conceptual understandings in my talk earlier. But I really don't want to leave this room without people understanding the value of kindness and compassion as an inside out. Because what I know now is that because our staff experience it here on the inside, when they engage with schools, they have that same kindness and compassion for the principals and the teachers that they work with. They don't question first, they ask first. And that for me is quite a powerful thing. I recently spoke with a facilitator who said, this principal's driving me insane. And as she was talking to me and sharing with me, and I'm mentoring her through it, she reflects and she says, I just remembered he actually lost his house in a fire a couple of weeks ago. And I said to her, that's the conversation you need to have. So her upsetness about how he wasn't implementing QMS and how he wasn't making decisions appropriately shifted completely. And she came back saying to me, that made the biggest difference. To reconnect with him around his losses, around where he's at in terms of his family, around the fact that he's been displaced, that mattered. And now she can work on his principal behavior. But that, I think, is something I feel is so crucial not to lose in this conversation.
No, thank you. So it's such an important point. And it speaks to another point that you shared earlier, the coming together of staff, and how there are different ways that staff can come together. And also, we were speaking earlier in another meeting around check-ins. you know, the power of check-ins, you know, today more, it's relevant today now more than ever. That literally just touching base, checking in, and I find there's many different ways to check in. There's many different questions that one can ask when you're checking in. And so when I'm attending a meeting or I'm engaging with somebody and they just have that one question of just, even just from a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing? That in itself reveals so much. And Sarai mentions here in the chat, leading with love is great investment. And just giving thanks for that, for what you've shared so far. And we definitely need strong work relationship. Yeah, we need strong relationship. We need these investments. We need the kindness. We need the compassion, the touching base. And Nadeen's been very, very generous in terms of sharing the different ways we can do that. I'm going to check in once again with everybody else here to see if there is anything else people would like to share, or any other check-in questions perhaps, or approaches that you may be using, or maybe that you've heard or experienced from another organization that really landed with you. Just trying to get the voices into this conversation as well. Okay, so we don't have any hands up, which is fine because we're also modeling the beauty of pause. We've got Ursula's hand up actually.
Sorry, I just put it up just as you said it, Lungi. Just checking if my sound's okay, because yesterday I had a bit of problems with this earphones. Okay, cool. About a month ago, I did a teacher training workshop for Reading to Learn with the Western Cape Education Department. It was all virtual. So it was a 7-week training with 150 teachers. We met once a week for 2 hours for a live session. The rest was all communication in text. But what we found was really challenging is in that massive room, people were very wary to switch on their cameras or mics and talk. Firstly, we found it was the time of day that we had the session. It was the time of day where people would generally have their kids around, maybe they were cooking or that sort of thing. So there was a lot of external noise. And then the other thing was, I think just the fear of being in this massive sort of empty room is how we ended up describing it. And we found that asking people to post emojis in the chat, because it was such a large group, worked really, really well. And you could get such a nice sense of the room just based on what people were picking. So it's a bit silly that it might be only useful in large groups, but we found a lot of joy just doing that here.
Great. No, thanks. Thank you, Ursula. Thank you so much for the reminder of the different approaches. And so no, it's really great contribution. And I think we're living in a world where we have to explore the different ways and to be mindful, as you said, you know, people are doing all sorts of things. It might be a wrong time. It might be too early. So people are not in a space to turn off on their cameras, for example. So thank you for that contribution. We do have 3 minutes left. So I'm going to just ask that we close if there's any last closing comments from Nadeen, and also just giving people the attention to the chat, that we would love you to look at the feedback form. It's really short. I know some people say that, but it's a really short survey. We appreciate the input. And if you have any recommendations in terms of speakers, facilitators who can hold these sessions, we want to hold these sessions on a regular basis, on a monthly basis, for example, or maybe it's you who'd like to put up your hand and reach out to us as NASCEE, and we'll engage with you and you can facilitate a session. But over to Nadeen to close us off, and thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Lungi, and thanks to everyone who's kind of participated or just been here over the last hour. I'm keen to understand if there's a need for us collectively to create a space where we can support and guide one another as practitioners in the field around this kind of thing. You'll see a question in the feedback form that talks to the possibility of perhaps establishing a kind of professional learning community. So we've referred to it in the survey form as a PLC, but I'm literally thinking of creating a peer mentorship space where we come together. If we can't do this face to face, because well, I'm based in the Western Cape, but I'm not sure where everyone else is. The idea would be really to create a space like this where we put videos on and we just talk. You know, people could come in and share, this is what I'm trying with staff, this is why things aren't working. So that would be the theme, a kind of inside out peer conversation space. Please let us know if that's something that you would be keen to do. Doesn't have to be a huge group of people. The issue is about quality and not quantity. But you know, we'll be dictated. NASCEE will be dictated to by the numbers and by your voices. So once again, just thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to share. I'm keen to send the recording to my colleagues to hear what they have to say about what I've said about them. So I'll wait for Sandy's link in the next couple of days. But thanks once again, Lungi. Bye.
Great. Thank you, everybody, and have a beautiful, beautiful day. Thank you so much, Nadeen, for this session. Very inspiring. We have all walked away with something that we've learned from you. So thank you for your time and passion.
No, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.